Hey there, I'm Amy from thecrazycraftlady.com. Head to the dollar store and grab an 8x10 stretched canvas and an 8x10 canvas panel, or grab two of them because we're going to make two different busted canvases for fall in two very different styles, along with free printables so you can make them yourself at home. Let's get making. All right, for this craft, you're going to start with your stretched canvas first. You're just going to want to remove that plastic outer layer, and we're going to start with the back side of the canvas. We're just going to apply a pretty generous coat of Mod Podge inside the whole center backside part of the canvas. The reason why I am more generous with the Mod Podge is because the backside of the canvas doesn't have that same white protective coating. It's more of like an unbleached type canvas, so it probably just absorbs more. Then you're gonna flip the stretched canvas over, and I designed this free printable in Canva. I'm obsessed with blue and green at fall time, so I wanted to kind of mimic those colors. So I grabbed Decor matte paint in Crocodile, Vintage White, and Mossy Meadow. I sprayed down the whole canvas because I really wanted this to have more of like a watercolor feel. I started with the Crocodile color. Big mistake, too dark, not the right family. So I switched over to Mossy Meadow. That was much better. And then I added a little bit of chalk paint in the color Castle, which is a little bit more gray to gray it up. I was really trying to match that free printable, that background that I'd showed you. And then around the edges, I used that Vintage White color. And I also painted all the way around the border edge of the stretched canvas. I was spraying water as I went. I really didn't want this to dry out because I really wanted a blended feeling. And so I really then, when it was time to blend all the colors together, I started with the white on the edges and then I moved my way into the center. Now, this looks horrible, so trust the process. I grabbed a little piece of like a 6x6 square of parchment paper, or use wax paper. I have done this with wax paper with my watercolors, works perfectly. Start on the edge in the white areas, and then you work your way into the center, and you're just gonna dab all over until you get the blended effect that you want. I re-scrunched and used a different part of the parchment paper and then started dabbing again. Then you set that aside to dry, and you're gonna unwrap your flat canvas there. We're gonna start on the back side with the paper part. We're gonna cover that with this free printable. So you're gonna take a pen and just cut the printable down to size because the printer paper is a little bit bigger than the 8x10 canvas, right? And then use your paper trimmer and cut a scant 1/4 inch inside that line that you marked. You want this printable to be cut smaller than that flat canvas. You don't want it to go all the way to the edges because the paper on the back of the flat canvas doesn't go all the way to the edges. There's a little canvas border on the back. Then on that paper area, you're going to cover the whole thing with just a regular school glue stick. I got a pack of them. It's back to school time, so you can get them at Walmart for like 99 cents or something crazy, for like a 4-pack or whatever it is. And then cover that whole thing and then smooth the printable right over it, center it and smooth it. I'd smooth it with the palms of my hands, and then I got on the edges some glue. So then I finished smoothing with the back of my hands because you don't want to get any of that glue stick on your printable image. Then flip that flat canvas over, and we're going to paint the whole thing. You're seeing I'm spraying with a little bit of water just to help spread that paint a little bit better with that same Mossy Meadow matte Deco Art paint. And you're just going to cover the whole thing as well as the edges. And if you'll see something went wrong. This flat panel was a little bit bigger than my stretched canvas. I've never really had it be this big of a problem before. So I tried to paint around the edges. You'll see my fix at the end. It didn't quite work out. But make sure you paint the edges so that you have a finished looking project. And here when I got to the end, I made sure that my brush strokes went all in the same direction just so it looked nice. And then I had this napkin, it's like a blue and white check. I think it was from Magnolia at Target. Beautiful napkin, and actually 3-ply, but I find it easier to cut it down to size before you separate the layers because you just want the top layer. So you see the Mod Podge that we applied earlier has dried. So I'm going to separate the 3 layers of this napkin, lay down only the top layer of the napkin over that dried Mod Podge. I'm going to protect it with a little square of parchment paper and then use my heat press, my mini heat press, to heat press the napkin onto the dried Mod Podge. So this reactivates the dry Mod Podge so that you get a smooth, bubble-free finish with your napkin piece. If you don't have a mini heat press, use an iron, no steam, no problem. Then it was time to assemble. So I took my stretched canvas, I set it over my flat canvas, and I realized, oh, we can still see some white on the edges. I did not love that on that flat canvas. So I went back and I painted more aggressively over the edges of that flat canvas, like around the edges of my printable, which you'll see still wasn't enough, but we're going with it. We're rolling with it. So then I flipped my stretched canvas over, and now you need to score it before you assemble the 2 canvases together. So I just took my pen blade on a cutting mat and I made an X, and then you make a line between each of the lines of the X. So you want to have 8 cuts. You're making like a little star, like an 8-point star. You'll see here, once I do my first pass, this was actually the easiest one I've ever done to cut through because normally I'm using things like scrapbook paper, but because it was just napkin and paint, it was really smooth to cut through. And then I just kind of finished off the cut through any areas that didn't make the perfect cut through with the pen blade with my little craft scissors there. And then you have that busted look. So you have your little triangles that you can bend back, and then you can assemble the top and the bottom piece of your busted canvas. So with that, you're just going to do hot glue. So I use my fine point hot glue gun. Do work pretty quickly so the hot glue doesn't dry. Glue all the way around the back border of that stretched canvas, and then be very careful to quickly flip over the stretched canvas, center it on the flat canvas, and then press down to secure the hot glue hold. You can then say, okay, where do I want my triangles to be? I'm gonna maybe cut a little bit more here and there to make sure that the image as much of the image shows that I want it to show. And then you're just gonna one by one for each of those little triangles, hot glue, roll back, press to secure. So you just wanna hot glue the point of that little triangle and roll it back. And that makes that busted look. So the image is busting out of the canvas. So I'll just speed this up and let you watch as I roll back each little one. Like I said, sometimes when you're using scrapbook paper to embellish, you have to hold for longer while the hot glue dries. But this one was really slick because it was just napkin and paint. So it was a thinner surface that I was rolling back. Then we're going to make a bow. So I grabbed 3 types of ribbon, thick, medium, skinny, and I cut 2 pieces each of the thick and the medium. You're just going to cut little kite tail ends where you fold it in half and snip at a 45-degree angle. So I went with the blue and tan theme again. So 2 thick pieces of blue burlap, 2 medium pieces of regular burlap ribbon, and then 3 pieces of skinny of this blue and white check that kind of matched that napkin that we use. And we're just cutting tail ends on all of them, kite tail ends. And I swear, about 30% of the time, I cut the angle at the wrong direction. So instead of having a kite tail, I have a point. I don't know why I struggle with this so much. You would think I would have it down, but I don't. Here we are. And then I grabbed my favorite, my lighters from Menards. They always have them at the end cap at checkout in a 2-pack. If you're from the Midwest, you know we save big money at Menards. It's just like Home Depot or Lowe's, but they sell snacks and candy and groceries too. So you just very, very carefully heat seal all the ends of your ribbons so that they don't fray. And then we're going to assemble our little bow. So start with the thick, work your way to the thin, and layer. You're just gonna pinch in the center and layer them at different angles, right? You want them to be like a scrappy bow at all directions. So pinch everything together in the center, stack it up, and then wrap it around, I don't know, 6, 7, 8 times with twine, however much you like, however much twine you want showing in the center. And then just secure it in the back, tie it real tight with a double knot, trim the tail ends of the twine, and then you can kind of fluff out the bow however much you want, and then hot glue it right to the top left corner of your canvas. And then you'll see here, I really was just not happy with how much of a gap and how much bigger this flat canvas was than the stretched canvas. So as my workaround, I took more of that blue and white check thin ribbon and I hot glued it all the way around the edge of my canvas project. I used my silicone fingertip protector, and I made sure as I hot glued in like intervals to add hot glue to both the stretched canvas and the flat canvas so that seam was completely covered. And then I just went all the way around the canvas, no problem. I know some people really like the more classic colors for fall, but I can't get over the blues and the greens. I love it. And here's my finished little fall project. For this craft, I started with my stretched canvas and I used Folk Art Home Decor chalk paint in the color Castle, which is one of my favorite go-to neutral base coat colors. You can see I'm spraying with a little bit of water here to help more smoothly finish my canvas. You don't need to have perfect coverage. This is just a base coat. We're going to put something over it that you'll see in a bit, but just paint the whole stretched canvas, the front panel, and all 4 edges. And then we're also going to paint that flat panel as well. On the back side where it has the paper and that little border of canvas, you're going to paint that with chalk paint. Make sure you paint that edge side as well. And then you're also going to paint the whole front panel of the flat canvas. Feel free to spray some water on it. It doesn't have to look perfect. It's the back of the project, but I figure a painted surface is better than just a plain white surface to make the project look more cohesive. Then I designed this free printable in Canva. You can download it. We're going to position the flat canvas panel, if I could speak, more towards the top of the printable because I decided I want my busted part to be lower down so I could put a bow up top. So just trace those lines and then cut a scant 1/4 inch just inside those lines with your paper trimmer. And then like I do on that back paper surface of the flat canvas panel, just cover the whole thing with just a regular school glue stick and then add on your little printable. And you'll see I tried to position the printable a little lower down so like the design was not perfectly centered. I wanted it a little bit lower. And then just smooth that right on down. So this was actually the inspiration. I found these fall rub-on transfers at Dollar Tree for $1.25. Womp womp. No, they were $1.50 because everything's $1.25 now. So these were $1.50 and now the stems are $1.75, like the floral stems. I'm over it, Dollar Tree. You've broken my heart. Anyway, so I centered this little rub-on transfer on the inside back of that canvas that has that like unbleached, it's more of like a tan canvas fabric. I secured it in place with painter's tape. And yes, this was a bit of work. Rub-on transfers do work on fabric, on drop cloth. It just takes some patience and some elbow grease. So that's why I securely positioned all 4 corners with painter's tape. I did not want this rub-on transfer slipping around. So you're going to take your little popsicle stick and rub all over in all directions, circles, up, down, left, right. It takes a minute. So I'm going to zoom in here and show you the way that you know that your rub-on transfer has transferred is it kind of bubbles up and it looks more opaque. So you can see like that leaf at the top. The top half has not transferred, the bottom half has because it looks a little bit more bubbly and the color fades. And so then I had finished that, and then you're gonna cover the stretched canvas with burlap. So the way I cut burlap is you pull out one string and then you cut in that gap so that you don't end up with a bunch of frayed edges. Now, I really, really took a chance on this, because if you've seen other busted canvases, you know we have to slice through all layers of that canvas, including the burlap, with a pen blade. That is not going to happen. So it's just too much. So I just wanted to see how far can I go with this whole stretched canvas thing, and it did work out. So I just centered my stretched canvas on my little piece of burlap, grabbed my hot glue gun and my silicone fingertip protector. Please do not use your plain fingertip, because this is burlap and that hot glue will seep through and remove your fingerprints, and that's not good. So I just hot glued all the way around, and then I folded up each of those 4 edges right along the edge of that stretched canvas there. Okay, so now moment of truth, you have to score. Normally, I would score the 8 lines right off the bat. In this case, I just did the 2 lines, the X little shape, right? And it obviously did not go all the way through, but through enough that I could sneak my scissors in. And I actually used my fabric scissors to then cut over that line that I had scored, so that I'm cutting all the way through the canvas and the burlap. So the pen blade did a pretty good job of cutting through the canvas, just not the burlap. And then for the other 4 little lines, I just cut them with my fabric scissors. It was just easier to do it that way, and that way I made it through both layers of the canvas and the burlap. No problem, it worked out. So from there, I flipped my little flat canvas panel over on top, because I just wanted to make sure I had done my spacing correctly before I hot glued everything together. Okay, yep, you can see all of the printable design. We're good to go. So then from there, I just added hot glue all the way around the edge of the back of my stretched canvas. Be generous, but work quickly so your hot glue doesn't dry. And then smooth that flat panel right onto the back, and you're all assembled. So then we just need to finish embellishing. So the first thing is to hot glue and fold all of those edges of burlap around the back of the canvas panel. Once again, use your silicone fingertip protector, fold in at an angle on the corners, and then keep going. If you want to, you could cover the edges of this frayed canvas with ribbon or something, or add a panel of fabric to the back. I didn't on this one. Maybe I should have. Who knows? And then flip that over, and now it's time to create that busted effect. So you're going to want to use a fair amount of hot glue, because you've got not only that canvas piece, but the burlap on top of it. So it's gonna, that dab of hot glue is gonna soak through that burlap on the bottom. And so you really just want to make sure that everything stays in place, and hold it down for a second with your finger. Press pressure from the bottom and the top to make sure you have a real good hold. And you are always feel free to take your scissors and cut those slits a little bit bigger if you want to. But then just work your way around and roll back all 8 of those little triangle corners and hot glue them in place. Okay, this is Battle of the Bows. So I had this leftover ribbon from Dollar Tree several years ago that I wanted to use up, and I thought the colors were pretty close. So I was gonna make like a double figure 8 bow, but this ribbon was so thick that by the time I made the first figure 8, I was like, oh, that's great plenty for the size of this project. So you make the little figure 8, pinch it in the center, and then I just grabbed a few strands off this orange burlap ribbon. Instead of using twine, I thought I'd use this orange twine, and wrap it around the center a handful of times. And then you can just secure it right in the back with a double knot. and you've got yourself a little figure 8 bow. Trim off those ends, and then cut the tail ends of your bow, the little kite tail, classic kite tail, fold it in half and cut it at a 45-degree angle. And then you're also gonna heat seal the ends with a lighter very carefully just so they don't fray. So now, I know on this video, it may not be obvious, but looking at it once that bow was finished, I was like, this bow is very bright compared to the muted tone of the printable and the little rub-on decals. I couldn't do it. So I had this leftover green and gold ribbon from last Christmas when I was super extra and wrapped all of our Christmas gifts in satin ribbon. I don't think I shared it online, but it was pretty beautiful. And so I just made a simple double figure 8. So you make one figure 8 and then a second one, pinch it in the center with the gold. And since this was going to be a layered bow for that first bow, I just wrapped it with a little tiny piece of twine in the center. Just wrap it, once or twice, and then secure it in the back with just a basic double knot. I should have cut the tail ends, but I left them. I wasn't really thinking. So just fluff out that bow. And then I made another same bow in the green, only just a tad bigger, and then you can layer them. And then I used a piece of that green satin ribbon to secure them together in the back. Again, with a simple double knot. And here you can see, oh yeah, I left the twine tail ends off. So I had to trim those off, no big deal. And then from there, I just positioned that in place. I must have cut the kite tail ends and didn't film it. So here you can see the orange one. It's very bright. I just wanted more muted, so that's why I went with the green and gold. Let me know in the comments which one you prefer. And then I wanted to add a little border. So I laid some painter's tape face up on a scrap piece of a manila folder, or you could use a scrap piece of cardboard. And then I just taped them down with more painter's tape. And I had actually measured the edge of my canvas. So I used 9 wooden half balls on the short ends and 11 on the long ends. So 11 plus 11 plus 9 plus 9. That's how many you need. What is that? 22 plus 18, 30. Okay, so these are 15mm wooden half balls I order on Amazon. I use them on like everything. I will link to them. But you just stick those onto the painter's tape and then use a pouncer brush. And in this case, it was a very dark paint. So this was Folk Art matte paint in the color olive green. Even though I pounced from left, right, I got down at eye level, I rotated it, I did all the things, it still was not perfect coverage. And that's fine, it just looked a little more rustic. If you were using a lighter paint color, you'd get great coverage. I've done gold and gotten perfect coverage. If you wanted to do a second coat, feel free. I just figured since we're doing burlap, everything's a little muted. It's okay if a little bit of that wood pokes through. I was kind of fine with that. And then normally I dry fit my wooden half balls directly on my projects, but since this was on the border, I really couldn't. So instead I just dry fit them on my craft desk right next to the canvas. Made sure they were totally evenly spaced, or as evenly spaced as I could make them. And then I just, one by one, hot glued each one right onto that edge, that side of my stretched canvas to make a little finished border. And I really think that tied in that green a little bit more because this was feeling really orangish and really brownish. So I just wanted to add a little bit more green. I guess to add color, although this is a quite neutral project, so I don't know if it says added a ton of color. But anyway, here is my finished little fall stretched canvas. And here are my 2 finished fall stretched canvases. Be sure to check the link or my blog post. There will be a big old button there that says download the printable for this project here. It's usually in the blog post right below the video tutorial. If you want to make one of these for your own, let me know in the comments section which one you like better. Until next time, happy making. Hey, if you enjoyed watching these crafts, give one of these videos a watch. Thanks so much.